Hi, my name is Stephanie Barrett, and I am a flutist, a music teacher, an adult figure skater, and a mom of two boys ages 12 and 10. Today we're going to be talking about ledger lines. In a nutshell, ledger lines make the staff bigger. Before we jump in though, I would love for you to like this video and leave me a comment letting me know what one thing surprised you about what we talked about today. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Before we can talk about ledger lines, we need to do a quick review of what the staff is and what the clef signs do. They're very important to understanding the ledger line. So first, we're going to review the staff. Your staff is 5 lines and 4 spaces. It's what we write notes on. There are actually 3 clef signs, but there are only 2 that we use in everyday music. The first clef sign that we use is the treble clef. Treble clef looks like this, and it typically indicates the high notes, like the word treble. Treble clef names line 2 G, and it is the G above middle C. After naming line 2 G, by default, the treble clef names all of the other lines and spaces of the staff. We have A, B, C, etc. Instruments that read in treble clef include instruments such as the flute, violin, clarinet, oboe, saxophone, and the upper staff of the piano. The other clef that we commonly use is called the bass clef. Bass clef looks like this, and it names line 4, the F below middle C, and it is typically the bass notes, the low notes. By default, because F is on line 4, we have G on space 4, A on line 5, etc. Instruments that play in bass clef include instruments like the cello, bassoon, euphonium, tuba, trombone, and the lower staff of the piano. I'm going to take the opportunity here to throw in a little bit of trivia for you. There is a third clef sign. It's called the C clef, and it indicates where middle C is on the staff. The fun part about the C clef is that it's actually movable. I'm going to show you an example of what the C clef looks like. Kind of like that. And this is what we call tenor clef, because the C clef is pointing to line 4 of the staff, making line 4 middle C. The bassoon and the trombone actually both read tenor clef. Now for the ledger lines. First, we're going to talk about ledger lines in the treble clef. Ledger lines are to make the staff bigger. If you think about it, there are 5 lines and 4 spaces of the staff. That encompasses 9 letter names and roughly 18-ish, it's a ballpark, notes total if we include some of the sharps and flats. When we write notes on the staff, we use lines and spaces to write the notes. So if G is our line 2, then the A is going to be our space 2. B will be line 3, and C will be space 3, just like that. Now for the ledger lines, because we can go higher than the notes in the treble clef staff permit, and we can go lower than the notes in the treble clef staff permit. This is how we increase the size of our staff. So after the top space note, treble clef G, we're going to add ledger line 1. It's a small line that goes above the staff, equally spaced from the staff lines, about like that. And then I'm going to place my note on the line. Ledger line 1 line note is A. Ledger line 1 above treble clef staff also has a space note. It will sit above that ledger line. That note is B. Now that we've had a line note and a space note for ledger line 1, we are on to ledger line 2. So now when we draw the notes, we're going to draw 2 ledger lines, equally spaced from the staff. And the note sitting on ledger line 2 is going to be a C in treble clef. And the note sitting on ledger line 2's space is a D. Our music alphabet can continue to go up ledger line by ledger line with a ledger line line note and a ledger line space note as far as you can theoretically imagine. Now notice when we were going up, we were going forward through the music alphabet. We had G, A, B, C, and D so far, and we could just keep going and going. Now we're going to go under the treble clef staff and use ledger lines to go backwards through the music alphabet and take our notes lower. So the first ledger line below the treble clef staff is middle C. That's ledger line 1 below the treble clef staff, C. Ledger line 1's first space note is B, below the treble clef staff. Now we're on to 2 ledger lines and another line note. And you've probably already guessed that 2 ledger lines below the treble clef staff is A. And there it is. Now what's really interesting about that A is that it's actually the same A that sits on line 5 in the bass clef staff, that A. So we have 2 ways of writing it. It really depends on the usage. If you're playing a clarinet that only reads in treble clef, you're going to be looking at that A. But if you're playing a bassoon that reads in bass clef, you'll most likely be looking at that A. Now for the bass clef. We're going to go a little faster with this because I know you're catching on. So here we go with bass clef. The space sitting on top of the bass clef staff is a B. Ledger line 1 above the bass clef staff is C. Ledger line 1 space note above the bass clef staff is D. Ledger line 2 above the bass clef staff is E. And I'm sure you can imagine that we can keep going up and up and up. Now we're going to go down. The space below the bass clef staff is F. Remember, when we go down in music, we go backwards through the music alphabet. So ledger line 1 below the bass clef staff is an E, right there. The space for ledger line 1 below the bass clef staff is D. And now we're on to 2 ledger lines below the bass clef staff. That note is C. One more thing that I want to point out about ledger lines is that we never run them together, unlike the staff lines that are just one big long line across the page. Every note gets its individual ledger lines. So I'm going to write a few and show you what it might look like to read a series of notes that are all on ledger lines. Here we go. There it is. Every single note gets its own series of ledger lines, and you can know its letter name by how many lines and spaces you go above the staff. When we draw two notes next to each other, we create a relationship. For example, these two notes. And that relationship is called intervals. That's what we're going to be discussing next week.